Hello, and welcome to this tutorial on how to create a workflow in SBM Composer. An application workflow ensures the proper flow of primary items using a defined process that consists of fields, states, transitions, and decisions. Items follow an application workflow from the time they are submitted to the time they are being closed. This brings visibility and accountability to your process. Let's get started on our workflow. From the workflow palette under States, click and drag an active state onto the screen. It will give you the chance to name it. For the first state, let's use Investigating. If you want to rename a state, simply double-click on the name or click on the state and in the Property Editor, change the name. A state is a position in an application workflow where a primary item resides. While an item resides in a given state, it typically has a primary owner who is responsible for performing a specific task with the item before it can be transitioned to the next state. Now in the workflow palette under the transition section, we will see a number of different transitions. The one we want is a regular transition. Click and drag a transition between the new and investigating state. We will name this transition Research. A transition activates the movement of a primary item from one state to another in the application workflow. A user who has ownership of an item transitions the item to the next state in the workflow when the corresponding task is finished. Transitions can be customized in many ways. For example, you can customize transitions so that they only apply to certain item types, such as bugs and problem reports, or so that only members of particular groups can execute them. Let's finish the rest of our workflow. Drag an active state onto the workflow and name it Assigned. Click and drag a transition between the investigating and assigned states. We will name this transition Assign. Drag a completed state to the right of the assigned state. This is the last state involved in the workflow and marks the end of the process. Name it Resolved. Let's add the last regular transition. And name it Resolve. On this last state, let's add an annotation. Annotations are notes that you can add to a workflow or sub-workflow. In the workflow palette under Common Items, click and drag an annotation onto the Resolve state. Double-click in the text area to add a note. Delete the text and say, Item is marked as resolved and closed. This lets anyone looking at the workflow know what happens at the end of the process. We have successfully created our IT Help Desk workflow using states and transitions, but we aren't quite done. Let's organize the workflow better by adding swim lanes. Swim lanes are a way to visually group states in an application workflow so others can quickly understand the workflow design. A swim lane typically represents either the activities performed by the same role of participant or by a distinct phase of the process defined by the workflow. You can right-click and click Add New Swim Lane or drag Swim Lane option from the workflow palette onto the workflow. Notice the swim lane first comes in horizontal. We have our layout organized differently. If we go to the Design tab, we can switch it over to vertical. Click on the name of the swim lane and rename it New. Let's extend the swim lane's width to fit in the states. Now drag the new state into the swim lane. We want to create new swim lanes for the other states too for better organization. Add another swim lane and name it Research. Drag and drop the investigating state into it. Add another swim lane and name it Assigned. Drag and drop the assigned state into it. Add the last of the swim lanes and name it Done. Drag and drop the resolve state into it. As you can see, the key benefits of swim lanes are that they provide efficient ways to organize the activities or phases encompassed by an application workflow. They help other designers and users understand the workflow design at a glance, and there are numerous formatting options that let you tailor the appearance of the swim lanes to your needs. We have now completed our workflow in swim lanes. If we want, we can extend functionality of the workflow by creating a sub-workflow. A sub-workflow is derived from an existing workflow. You could create a sub-workflow if you wanted to recreate the basic process defined in the existing workflow, but do things such as removing some states or changing the privileges on some transitions in the sub-workflow. Each workflow can contain multiple sub-workflows, and sub-workflows can contain their own sub-workflows. You can create a sub-workflow by right-clicking on the workflow in the workflow design and clicking the Add New Sub-Workflow option. Now you have a sub-workflow to adjust and manage. Now that we've created our workflows, you will want to add fields for live data interaction with users. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video on how to successfully create a workflow in SBM Composer.